Earlier this morning, the political chess-playing pundits over at CNN, well, they checked the dodge in Trump's latest strategic maneuver to wiggle out from the crushing weight of the Lolita Express. Now, as he grabs at the slippery plastic straws of desperation with his bruised hand, discolored from vigorous shaking or maybe drawing or probably praying or more likely grabbing, as he readily admits, CNN's John Berman was stunned by Trump's conditional release of the details, the 300 gigabytes of potential guilt that we call the Epstein files. Let's check it out together. It's our featured story from just earlier this morning on CNN.
General Pam Bondi to release pertinent, and we'll get back to that word, pertinent grand jury testimony from the Jeffrey Epstein case. The directive came hours after the president angrily denied a Wall Street Journal report detailing a birthday letter allegedly sent to Epstein inside of a doodle of a naked woman. Again, all of this vigorously denied by the president. With us now, CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. The president tells the Attorney General Pam Bondi to ask a court for the release of pertinent grand jury testimony. Why is the word pertinent important here, Ellie?
Well, pertinent's doing an awful lot of work there, John. First of all, just grand jury testimony itself is only going to be a fairly small fraction of the entire file. In addition to that, we now have this word pertinent. And so that begs the question, pertinent to what? And pertinent as determined by who? So it gives the Attorney General, in some respect, wiggle room, but it also puts her in a very difficult position where apparently she's going to have to A, decide what's pertinent, and then B, you have to go in front of a federal judge and get permission to release grand jury materials. So there's a lot of hurdles still in place here.
What is the difference between calling for the release of pertinent grand jury material and calling for the release of all investigatory information in the Jeffrey Epstein case, which is what some Republicans and the president's own supporters have long been calling for?
So there's a massive difference there, John. So if you think of the entire file here, and by the way, we know from last week's FBI memo that this is a huge file, 300 gigabytes of information. That's millions and millions of pages of documents. You can sort of separate it into two perceptual categories. There's grand jury materials. Those are presumptively confidential. By law, you cannot turn them over to the public as a prosecutor unless you get a judge's permission first. But then there's all the rest of it. That's something that the president, the attorney general, can decide on their own without going through a judge first and say, I'm going to release this. And so what the president has done here is said, I only want to focus on the narrow category, the grand jury stuff, that you first have to go to a judge for. As to all that other stuff, the majority of the file, that is entirely up to the AG and the president. If they want to release that today, they can do that.
Okay, wow. I want to make that even more clear. What the president has now publicly called for is for the attorney general to push for the release of stuff that they can't control the release of. A court can. What he's not calling for is the release of information that he and the attorney general can control?
Exactly. So when you think of a file, you have your grand jury materials. Actually, you typically store your grand jury materials in a physically different colored folder because you need to set that aside because that's the confidential stuff. So all the stuff that's in a red or yellow folder, all the grand jury materials that has to go through a judge, that's what Donald Trump is saying, I want you to ask a judge to release. But then the bulk of the file is going to be everything else, everything that is not grand jury testimony. All of that is within Donald Trump, is within Pam Bondi's discretion to release. Now, of course, they'd have to make all sorts of determinations about it. They'd have to redact out to protect victims and witnesses and minors. And by the way, ordinary DOJ procedure is you would never release any of this. This is a closed case investigative file. Try to serve a Freedom of Information Act request on DOJ for any such file and watch how quickly they reject it in the ordinary course. So Trump and Bondi are already painting way outside the lines here. But yes, John, the specific portion that Donald Trump has said, I want you to try to release, that also happens to be the exact portion that a judge has to sign off on first.
And this is something that judges very rarely release. It's something that you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get out there. Ellie Honig, great explanation. Thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Hey, you got to hand it to him, right? I mean, Trump's fat little fist continues to thrust indignantly at all those who would criticize him because, well, like it or not, all the world is indeed a stage for Donald to create his own reality show. And in that world, well, a picture's worth 1,000 words and maybe an innocent person's life.
We love you. We love you, President Trump.